Hi everyone, it's Lindy on here from Pink Whisper Designs. Today we're going to be playing with some Tim Holtz products, but primarily we're going to be looking at the brand new Sizzix Thinlits Gentleman die set. We're going to be using one of the Gentlemen today, but since I love these so much, I decided to do a part two. So in about a week or so, I'll have part two, which we will use the other two Gentlemen. Today we're creating a mixed media card, and we're going to focus on the Foundry wax, the distressed embossing glaze, the distressed sprays, and so much more. But let's first get started creating our background. So to keep things a little bit neater and cleaner here, I've got my Wendy Vecchi Make Art Station, and I've placed the Wendy Vecchi non-stick craft sheet on top, and this is designed to fit right onto your Make Art Station. And I've placed some magnets on there to hold it in place. And for cardstock, I've got the Strathmore Bristol Smooth 100-pound cardstock. So now for sprays, I'm starting with the Distress Oxide spray in the Lumberjack Plaid. This is one of the newer colors in the Tim Holtz collection. I'm just going to shake that up really well, and then I'll spritz that right onto my cardstock. Now for the second color, I'm going to be using the Walnut Stain. And again, I did shake that up really well, and I'm going to add some of that to this card panel. And now I'm going to add some water. I'm just using my Distress sprayer and spritzing this with plenty of water. Now I kind of want that brown and red to mix together, so I am using my finger. You don't have to do that here. You could use a brush, or you could just let that water blend those colors together, but I wanted to get a really nice mix. And then I'm going to heat set it, and you can see because I'm using the Distress Oxide inks, I am getting that oxidation as I'm drying this, which is just absolutely gorgeous. So you can see I've got that nice mix of color with the Walnut Stain and the Lumberjack Plaid, and I do want to make sure I heat set this panel really well before I come in with the third color. And I'm using pumice stone. I'm going to spray that directly onto my craft mat, and then without adding any water or anything, I'm just going to pick up some of that ink. And I just think this is so beautiful, the way this just kind of blends in and gives me some veins. We are going to create a wood grain texture, and so now let me just clean up that pumice stone. And I'm going back with the Walnut Stain. I'm just going to do a couple little spritzes, and then I want to spatter this. So I'm drying in between the layers. Now if you are going to add more layers of color, you do want to dry between the layers, and then you can keep adding more. So now I've got that Walnut Stain, and I'm just using the nozzle. I'm dipping it right into the container, and I'm going to get some nice big spatters. I'll heat set that again. Once that's dry, what I want to do is emboss this, and we're going to be using this beautiful Texture Fades embossing folder from Tim Holtz. And look at the color that we have here. I just think that is gorgeous. But first, let's make sure we clean off the nozzles on all of our sprayers. So I like to make sure I wipe them down before I put them away so that they won't clog. And here's that 3D Texture Fades embossing folder. This is called Tree Rings. And I just love this. Look at all the texture we're going to get. So I'm placing that panel into the embossing folder. I've got a couple of pieces of cardboard. If you watch my videos, you know I love to just put a couple pieces of cardboard or some cardstock right on top of that embossing folder, and I've got the platform underneath, and I run it through, and you can see how beautifully that has embossed. You should use the directions for your specific machine in order to run that through any of your 3D embossing folders. If it is too tight as you're running it through, just make sure you back it out and start again. You don't want it to be too tight as you're running that through. Now I'm switching over to the black soot, so you can see that I used a blending brush and I added that Walnut Stain all the way around, and I came in a little bit on those edges, and then with the black soot I'm not going to come in quite as far. Just going to add deepen the edges of this panel a little bit more. Now what I want to do is run this back through the embossing folder. I'm just making sure that it lines up in there, and it's like a puzzle. It'll slide right back into place. And I'm using the black Soot Distress Oxide ink. I'm adding it to the top panel of the embossing folder. And now we're going to deepen the lines in this embossing folder. And I did save this for last because I want to make sure that I didn't blend out any of that black. I want to keep it nice and crisp inside those little open areas. So now you can see how beautiful that is, and that really brings out the texture of this embossing folder. Next, we're going to be using the Distress Embossing Glaze, and again we're using that Lumberjack Plaid, and you'll see this is just absolutely gorgeous. Now I've got my Versamark watermark ink pad, and I'm just scraping it lightly around the edges and a little bit in the middle of this card panel. And again, I just want to use a light touch. I don't want to get a lot in that middle area. I want more on the edges, but I do want to bring it in towards the center a little bit. So again, I'm just using a light hand, and that is an embossing ink. And this is an embossing powder, so I'm going to go ahead and heat set that with my heat tool. And what happens with this glaze is it gets this beautiful shiny finish on it. And do keep in mind that anything underneath the glaze will show through. So if you have text under there, any kind of printing, if you're collaging, all of that will show through this glaze. And in part 2, I'm going to be showing you that. We're going to be doing some stamping, and then you'll see how that glaze will allow all that stamping to show through. So here you can see that beautiful glaze that we have. Now I'm using the Distress Kraft Heavystock from Holtz as my card base, so I've gone ahead and cut that. So we have a standard A2 size top folding card, so that will measure 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And this will give us a nice heavyweight card. I used my Nuvo Deluxe adhesive to glue that down. And now here are the Holtz Sizzix Thinlits Gentleman dies, and aren't these fantastic? We're going to be using that one there today. And you can see that they measure about 4 3/4 inches tall, so they're quite large. Now I'm going to run that one through my Sizzix Sidekick machine, and I'm using some Holtz black Heavystock cardstock. I will die cut about 3 or 4 of these, and then I guess I did 3, and then we will glue these together. That will give us a nice thick embellishment. Again, I'm going back to that Nuvo Deluxe adhesive to glue these together. And you do want to take a little time to make sure you line these up really well. So I'm just using the glue because it gives me some time to move those around. So next we'll go to the Pumice Stone Distress ink pad. This is the Oxide ink. We used that Distress spray earlier. What I want to do is add a little bit of a highlight around the edges of my gentleman, and I'm using a sponge dauber, and I'm just going to add that ink all the way around the edges, and you'll see that really makes this pop out. I'm going to set that aside to dry. Let's grab some elements for our card. So I want this flash card that says happy. And again, the Holtz Idea-ology collection, and you can see all the flashcards you get in this set. I love these. And they're double-sided, so each one has 2 sentiments on it. And then we'll use the label stickers. These are the sentiment stickers from the Holtz Idea-ology collection. And I'm going to grab the word birthday. And you can see you get quite a few sentiments on here. I use these a lot. These are one of my go-to sentiment sticker sheets. And I'm just going to just cut out that word birthday. And then what I will do is attach this to a piece of that heavyweight black cardstock just to give it a little bit more substance. And I'll go ahead and trim that down with my scissors. These are sticky, so you can just stick it right onto your project if you prefer, but I'm going to just add that cardstock behind there. So now I've got the Tim Holtz baseboards. This is the Christmas Noel collection. And I was debating, I thought I might use those chipboard stars, but I definitely want to use that little hand. And then there's also a sentiment strip in there. It says Happy Holidays, but we're just going to be using the happy because it really goes well with the Lumberjack plaid that we're using for the embossing. And you know I love to use up my leftover Christmas or Halloween supplies. I don't like to let them go to waste. I also want to grab these Adornment stars from Tim Holtz. These are some metal stars, but again, I hadn't decided at this point whether I wanted the chipboard or the metal. Either of these would work, or any stars that you might have. I'm not sure those metal stars are still available, but I will list and link everything that is available down below. I've got my Pitt Artist pen in black. This is a permanent pen, and I'm just going to add some wonky stitching here, just kind of random. You could skip this part if you want to, but I thought it would be fun just to add a little bit more interest to this flashcard. A couple little stitch marks there, and I'll let that dry. So I've got that little hand, and with the chipboard embellishments, they're really nice. But I don't like that cardboard edge that you get, so I always like to add a little bit of ink. I'm just using a tiny little blending brush and adding some ink all around the edges. And just to get it started, I'm just rubbing that ink pad right onto the chipboard and then just blending that out. So that's a couple of our embellishments. Now, at this point, I did decide I didn't want to use those chipboard stars, but if you were going to use them, you want to edge those with that black soot. And now I've got the word happy. This is a thick chipboard embellishment. I'm using my X-Acto knife to cut through this. And the way I find the best way to do this is to use several cuts. So you don't want to try to cut through the whole thing in one shot. I just make a few cuts, and then once I can get that separated, I use my scissors to cut it apart. And do be careful when you're using that X-Acto. You may want to get it onto a surface that's not quite as slippery as I'm using here. Now here, I also wanted to show you that if you have the Tim Holtz titanium scissors, that will cut right through so easily. You won't have to worry about the X-Acto. So that's the safer and better way to go. And you can see how easily I can cut right through that chipboard. Now, keep in mind, I will list and link all the products I'm using today down below and also on my blog. So here I'm just adding some ink, again, just kind of pressing that into my ink pad and then blending out some of that black soot ink. And it really does make a difference to take the time to edge these chipboard embellishments. So we've got all our little pieces ready to go for the card. Let's go ahead and attach this panel to the front. And here I was trying to decide which way I wanted that little wood circular part to be. So just play around with that. So I flipped it over. And again, this measures 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I've got my flash card and the little pointing finger there. So I'm going to go ahead. I did decide to heat set this. These flash cards have a little bit of a shine to the finish, a little bit of a glossy finish. So it wasn't completely dry, and I did smudge it just a little bit, but I kind of like the way that looks. So I'm not going to worry about it. I'm not going to redo it. Just going to glue that down. Just checking the positioning here. And I've got that Nuvo Deluxe adhesive again. I'm putting plenty of it on. Do keep in mind that this dries clear, so even if a little bit of it oozes out, it will dry nice and clear. So let's go back to the gentleman. Now that that edging is dry, that little shadow around the edges. I'm going back to the Distress Oxide spray and I'm going to spatter this. And I will say that by using the spray rather than placing some ink from the ink pad down and watering it down to spatter it, you get a much more vivid color if you use the sprays to do your spattering. And you can see that. Again, I'll let that dry. And now we can glue him. Once that's dry, we can glue this right on the front of the card. And I will put a couple of heavy objects on top of that and let that dry completely. Once that was dry, I'm going to add that little chipboard happy. So we've got happy, happy, and then we'll add that birthday sentiment down in the lower right-hand corner. Now I've got some multi-medium matte glue. This is from Ranger. And I am using this glue to glue down these metal embellishments. I know for sure that it will hold these down and they won't go anywhere. So for your metal embellishments, I think this is the best adhesive to use. Again, it will dry nice and clear. I'm putting a little bit on the back of each of these stars. And then we're going to add some Foundry wax to these stars, so they're really going to get interesting looking. So let's let those dry. Now here's that Foundry wax, and this one is called Mind. It's kind of a brassy, coppery, I don't know, really pretty color. I thought it would go nicely with the colors that we already have. So what you want to do is shake that up really well. I'm using a sponge dauber, but you can use your fingers if you want. And I'm going to just tap it onto these metal stars, and then I'm going to start adding some around the edges of my card. Now do keep in mind with the Foundry wax, once it dries, it will turn into a dust. So you want to just add little bits of it at a time. And then you want to heat set it. If you don't heat set it, it won't stay attached to your card. So you want to heat set it, and that's when you get that beautiful glossy finish to it. So let's do a little bit more, and you can see that on those stars, the metal stars, it's not quite as glossy, has a little bit more of a muted finish. So here I'm just tapping on in some random areas where I want that beautiful mind color to be. And then you do need to heat set this. So once you heat set it, again, you will get that really pretty metallic finish. I like to add a little at a time, just kind of adding a little bit, seeing if I like it. I don't want to overdo it. I just want to add that effect, but not have it overtake the card. So I just do little small sections. Now I'm going to add some to that little birthday sentiment. And I'm just showing you there that it seems to be staying attached to those metal stars quite well. I'm sure if you tried to scrape it off, you probably could. But since it's just a card, I'm not going to worry about that. And I think it just looks so pretty. And keep in mind that part 2 of the Gentleman series will be out in about a week or so. So if you liked today's video, please hit the like button and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so that you don't miss a single video. So hopefully you got inspired today to pull out some of your Tim Holtz products and have some fun. Thanks again for joining me. I hope you all have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.